where you see the priorities for Ukrainian forces in the weeks and months ahead?
First of all, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very interesting question concerning the pessimistic or optimistic. I'm optimist. Believe me, I'm optimist from 2014, from the beginning of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. But statistics, the figures, the real intelligence assessment show us the activity of Russian Federation, preparation for the next stage of war, and of course concerning the production of weapons, missiles, munition, and so in the territory of Russia. We prepare a very short presentation about the current situation in battlefield, about, first of all, the plans of Russian Federation in this year. Why? Because it's very important for us, for our partners to understand what next step of Russian Federation in our country, and some statistics, some figures about the missile strike, preparation of Russia for further combat activity in our territory.
When I was entering this room, there was a very interesting exhibition, one of the parts of genocide against Ukrainian people. Children, IDPs, people who are forcibly taken out to the territory of Russian Federation. One of the parts of genocide is the continuation of active warfare of Russian Federation on our territory. Very simple strategic goals of Russian Federation. First of all, they want to destroy Ukrainian sovereignty. They want to take our territory under control. This has been since the very beginning, probably since the collapse of the Soviet Union and the independence of Ukraine. The next strategic goal that a Russian Federation cannot achieve for about 2 years now is the full occupation of Lugansk and Donetsk oblasts, and the warfare, the tactical warfare that we see now on the battlefield is aimed at achieving at least one of the strategic goals of the so-called special military operation against Ukraine, the full occupation of Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast. And the third goal is to maintain the occupied territories, including the Crimea Peninsula, the territories of Kherson and Zaporizhia Oblast, to ensure the presence of Russian troops on our territory and to ensure the capability of continuation of the warfare. So the Russian Federation right now has increased significantly its component, the troops. This is in comparison to January 2023. As regards to the troops from 330,000 to 463,000, the number of artillery systems and troops, and usually this is the equipment that comes from the storage or was upgraded since the beginning of the war. Of course, they have the capability of producing new weapons, but the number of armored vehicles and artillery systems is uncomparable to what Russian Federation is using right now. If you take the beginning of the large-scale aggression, Russia was using at that time from 180 to 190,000 troops. Now it's only the troop component is 462,000, and so this issue is addressed also by the question of controlling the territory is addressed also by these numbers. Also, the 35,000 of Russian Guard, which is ensuring the operation of the occupied territories, those who will be ensuring the elections on our territory, and those who very rigidly carry out the counterintelligence regime against the population on the occupied territories. Unfortunately, Russia is trying to develop their capabilities to hit with missiles and bombs on our territories. If you look at the slide, the dynamic is growing. This is December and June, and January. The end of it was in November, the beginning of January, the 2nd of January, with usually air-based cruise missiles. The last one was in September. Russia was accumulating the weapons, and despite the economic sanctions that have the right to the capability of producing these missiles, but there is one specific feature: whatever they use, they start applying against our military and civilian facilities right away. On these slides, you can see other objectives of Russian Federation, and they will be relevant during the first half of the year, or probably the rest of the 2024. First is to destroy our air defense. I mean, not just destroying it, but exhausting the air defense, because our anti-missiles equipment are effective in destroying them. Second question is destroying our landing fields, airfields, and because the planes that carry Storm Shadow are very effective in striking Russian military goals. The bright examples, you know, I'm not going to repeat. The anti-air defense, the Black Fleet, Black Sea Russian fleet, they're completely isolated, and they now are stationed in Novorossiysk already. And the new task which Russian forces are facing is to destroy our defense industry facilities and companies, to prevent the increase of the capacity of Ukrainian army in terms of building up the logistics. And because we have localized our production, we started producing a lot of pieces of equipment that are efficient, and they're hitting Russian targets very efficiently. Speaking about the Black Sea Fleet and the threats that we're having now, they were trying to cut off all of our communication channels. They're trying to provide the transportation of our civilian cargoes. First of all, the harvest, the crops, the grain. Right now, they manage only to patrol the water territories and borders that we allow them to. And the only advantage that they can use caliber systems. The last strike was 3 caliber systems that, with partnership with our partners, the anti-missile systems were all hit down. So the capabilities of the Black Sea Fleet is a bit restricted. It's all based in Novorossiysk right now, but the threat that the Black Sea Fleet was carrying for Ukraine, not only for Ukraine, but for other countries of Ukraine, unfortunately still persists, and we will do our best to make sure that this threat is minimized and to restore the proper navigation, civilian navigation in our region. To talk about the objectives for this year, strategical and tactical, tasks have been identified. Regarding the work of all the troops, they will be aimed at continuation of the hostilities. The mobilization on the territory of Russia is going on, and they managed to replenish the losses they have had. But the reserve that they have is not enough to carry out powerful strategic advances on 3 or 4 directions that Putin is talking about, and what he is scaring the whole Europe with regarding opening the second front and advances, etc. The land component is not capable of doing the advance operations. Yes, attacking by missiles is possible, but advancing without strategic reserves is not possible. And the last thing I want to say is genocide of the Ukrainian people will continue, unfortunately. And we understand this. This means the destruction of our infrastructure, that means the destruction of our civilian objects. This means the destruction of our people, because on the daily basis, when drones are used, or then just simple aviation bombs that drop on our cities, they lead to a lot of damage of the civilian infrastructure. That's the main of our assessment. I'm very grateful to our partners, the Institute of the Study of Logics. By the way, it was commented by on our assessment. This is a very powerful team that is working here, but there's one goal, is to communicate to the international community the truth about Russia, about their activity, and the fact that we're ready to protect our independence. I'm very grateful for all our partners for their understanding and support that they are providing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, General, for that very comprehensive, if rather distressing assessment of where things stand. I want to just ask you one question while we have you, and I have to bring up the S word, stalemate, which has come to dominate conversation in many U.S. and I believe Western European circles, at least. Do you think that is an accurate assessment of where the war stands? And if so, why? If not, why not?
First of all, any stalemate is the possibility for Russian Federation to accumulate their forces and restore their capabilities. We have seen this in 2015 and 16, when on the occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk we have stopped hostilities, and then there was new aggression in 2016. Then the hostilities will go on. This, according to our assessment, no one is talking about reinforced defense or ceasefire, because any ceasefire will be used by Russia to improve their tactical positions and status, and increase their capability of opening up new areas for hostilities. And despite the war, you know that the territory is this territory is very difficult for the hostilities. It will continue. We can't just afford to lose our territory by not doing anything. Regarding this stalemate and negotiation process, well, and you heard what Putin said, and if he really believes what he said about us, then probably he's much worse than we think he is.
General, do you have time for one more question, or do you have to go? Okay. Let me just ask you one more quick question. I think there are many. Let me just channel the pessimistic view a bit that you hear among, I think, some U.S. military officials and civilian officials, as well as outside analysts, looking at this picture, looking at everything that the Russians have arrayed against you. There's an argument that the best course for Ukraine over the next year or so is to focus on defense, to focus on entrenching its current positions, defending defense industries, investing in further production, and waiting for some period of time before attempting offensive operations again. Do you see that as the right conclusion from the scenario that you laid out?
We have to understand very clearly the capabilities and what Russian Federation is doing. The enemy is learning, and they are learning very quickly. For example, the cruise missiles Has-2-1 is completely different. It has the active system of electronic countermeasures, the heat traps, etc. So, in this case, if we even start the sole defense approach, and we start developing our defense industry without taking into account the our missile strikes and not taking account the strikes on our facilities, then they will advance. So we have to do our best to make sure that our defense industry is protected and produces a lot. And we have to do also countermeasures to advance and not to allow to lose our territories. And the experience of 2023 has only proven this.
Thank you so much, General. I want to go to the Foreign Minister to talk a bit about the global political and geopolitical context. This is somewhat myopic, but I have to start by asking about the importance of the U.S. assistance package. We've been arguing in our Congress for months now about this $61 billion additional assistance package, much of which is in, of course, for weapons, which would be produced in the United States, but would be sent to Ukraine. How important is this package? Or to put another way, what are the consequences if this is not passed?
Well, financially, it is important because it will help us sustain and continue strengthening up our military, but also to help our macro-financial stability. But this assistance is also politically important because it will send a clear message that the United States remain focused, remain committed, and it will resonate across the globe in other places. If the assistance doesn't come, the political consequences of that will be damaging. As of now, I think the situation is manageable. The good news is that the discussion on whether to provide Ukraine with assistance is over, and it rests in peace in 2023. The whole discussion is on the border now, but of course, time matters. We are almost in the end of January. The war continues. The decisions have to be made.
And is there any sense of when they have to be made before that starts to cause problems on the battlefield?
Well, the optimistic scenario is by the end of January. That's what we're being told by our U.S. partners. And by the way, all of them, irrespective of the side of the political spectrum and in Washington they come from, they're all optimistic about the outcome. They vary on the dates. They all blame the border issue for that. But what can we do? We did all the talks. We walked all the walks. We will keep doing it. But in the end, it's the decision that has to be made within the framework of U.S. domestic politics.
And I know it's not within your powers to fix the southwestern border of the United States, unfortunately. But I realize you could if you would.
Our brigade could fix it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I imagine.
Maybe two.
Stepping back a bit, you've done an incredible amount over the last 2 years to explain the situation Ukraine's in, to make the case for support of Ukraine in Europe, in the United States, and globally. There is a sense that support is starting to erode. Some of that is the politics in my country and in Western Europe. Some of that is about Gaza and events far away from Ukraine. What is your sense about the state of global support? Do you sense that weakening? Do you have concerns about the growing questions about whether this support is worth it, about double standards that you get in the context of Gaza as well?
The question that really bothers me since day one of the large-scale invasion, and I still don't have an answer to it, is how many friends do you need to win the war? Because the answer to this question defines the way you will allocate resources to work, to engage friends or to work with friends and try to get them on board. I think the conversation about The whole conversation about the difficulties, the stalemate, and the other kind or war fatigue misses one important point. The GDP, the combined GDP of all countries who provide Ukraine with military assistance is 21 times higher than the combined GDP of Russia and countries who provide it with military assistance. So there is no factual ground at all to have any discussion about the fear of losing the war of attrition, the war fatigue, or the stalemate. Countries who are already with Ukraine, and I'm not mentioning countries who vote in favor of Ukraine, who sympathize Ukraine, I'm focused specifically on countries who do stuff, military stuff. They are 21 times more powerful than Russia. So there is not a single fact that supports the argument of those who complain about everything, all the pessimistic things that I mentioned. Then we go beyond that. I think the best answer to there are always issues because every country is special. Every country wants to be treated in a special way. Every country wants to be heard. And yes, I recognize the fact that the war in the Middle East armed some of countries who were looking for excuses, and they finally got one, an example of what they call double standards. It's true. But did it reach kind of the scale of a pandemic? No, it didn't. 3 days ago here in Davos, there was a meeting on Ukraine's peace formula. 83 participants, Africa, Asia, South America represented. President Zelensky was seeing African, Asian leaders yesterday. So, no, I don't feel they turned their backs to us. But of course, those who are looking for excuses, they found one.
And then let me bring up one more question, just channeling a perspective that I'm not endorsing, but I think it's worth getting it out in the open here, and that's the question of negotiations, which you've of course dealt with quite extensively. There is, I think, in the U.S. certainly a growing sense that it might be in Ukraine's interest to engage in some kind of negotiation in the near term, even if it's just to show a willingness to. I've heard, former colleagues of mine make that case. Are you sensing pressure from partners, supporters to at least show openness to negotiations? And what is your response to those calls, whether that's coming, in public or in private?
Well, I can save time for other speakers and answer simply no, right? But
no pressure from
no pressure.
The Americans, the Europeans.
Listen, Putin made a very clear point, I think yesterday or 2 days ago. We are not going to give away what we achieved. Right. What is the essence of the talk, you can imagine, with him? What is the subject matter of the conversation? He wants war. He will continue with the war. I think he will continue to fight different wars until he dies. We just have to understand one thing, that we, and I don't mean only Ukrainians, we as a community that defends certain rules, we bear historical responsibility for winning this war. We must, if we want this world, the way this world is organized, to sustain. I was in one meeting today with the Director General of the World Health Organization, and he made a very good point about fighting pandemics and that new types of viruses are coming, and we have to be ready for that. And I can easily transfer this, apply this to our situation. I mean, you do not stop fighting pandemics because you got tired of inventing new vaccines against new types of virus, right? You do not say, this is it. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm tired. I cannot spend more money on this. Because you understand that what is at stake is the life of humanity. What is at stake in the war we are fighting is the life of the world order as we know it. And therefore we must win, we must keep investing, and we must keep reinventing ourselves while the enemy is also doing that. That's also a fact.
Let me ask one more question about the diplomatic task at hand, and that's about China, which you have made an effort to engage? There's been kind of shifting rhetoric and shifting engagement from the Chinese government. How do you see China's role at this point? Is there any active role, any possibility of pressure on Moscow? What's the state of play at the moment?
I don't believe that this war is in the strategic interests of China. We think that China currently follows developments and observes as different sides are throwing more and more resources into it. China is focused on its economic issues, but also on the developments in its own region. We want to talk more with China. We want to have more contacts with them at all levels, because the basic assumption that we have in our approach to China is that China is interested in independent and peaceful and prosperous Ukraine. Also because of our the imminent imminent chance for Ukraine imminent perspective of Ukraine to become a member of the common market of the European Union.
Thank you, Foreign Minister. Let me turn to President Kaljulaid. I'm going to move from east to west and end with the United States. You are quite attuned to both the importance of the fight in Ukraine, but also the fractiousness of the debate about support in European capitals and in the US. You heard the Foreign Minister's assessment of outside support. What is your assessment of skepticism in Europe? Do you see it growing? Where are you most concerned when you look at the array of debates in European capitals right now?
First, I need to do a really quick assessment of my friend Minister Kuleba's diplomatic style. I mean, I can understand when you talk about China this way. Let me beg to differ. I think China has nothing against having Russia as a thorn in West's side for long term and a vassal economy. I think this is something which they don't need to do anything, but things might turn out this way, and I cannot see how exactly they cannot be happy about it. In Europe, I think we've understood slightly better maybe than in the beginning of this long-term war, which started in our understanding in 2008 in Georgia. Now the understanding is slightly better that indeed this Russian virus may have a Gazan version and may have a Venezuelan version and, God forbid, may have a Chinese version one day. So in Europe, we really are attuned to making sure that Ukraine wins. We've heard President Macron say that, or remind us that it's perfectly within the international legal space for Ukraine to attack Russian territory if it contains these attacks to military action. We've heard Chancellor Scholz to call for more help and to audit the European help. And which made me think that how on earth can we prove that there were Estonian javelins in Hostomel airfield? I don't know, but okay, we'll try to do the best in that audit. But I mean, I would now concentrate on parameters, and I will leave the global context to Wolfgang Ischinger. He's much better at that than I am. If I see and hear people saying, we did so much, but Ukrainians now need to think about having negotiations because there is the state, then I ask how much we did. And it seems like we did something like 0.1% of GDP annually, 0.2% of our Rammstein GDPs over 2 years. Now what Russia did was 30% of GDP, and this explains it. Every month we do 5 billion and Russians do 10 billion. Now imagine we didn't do 0.1, but 0.3% of the Rammstein coalition GDPs. Then we would be doing 15 billion a month and Russians would be doing 10 billion a month. Does it sound like too much effort? Can we say that we have done enough? I mean, you can go more into the micro and say, we've trained 50,000 Ukrainian soldiers. True, only 4 or 5 weeks per soldier, which is good enough for defense. But you need to go from company to brigade level to exercise for at least 20 weeks to get, I mean, capable of really attacking and forcing Russians to withdraw. Per soldier, we've been spending how much? 3,500 euros? Doesn't sound like we've done everything we could. It's very good Russian stratcom to tell us all and to make us believe, unfortunately also Russia to believe, that NATO members, the Rammstein coalition, did what it could and it couldn't beat Russia in Ukraine. I'm very worried if we believe it, but I'm even more worried if Russians believe it. Because for them that means, this NATO, this is nothing. We can easily overcome this NATO. These are the parameters of our, well, I'm very grateful for what has been done, and I understand we need time to go into gear. But nevertheless, now having been very positive about European words, when I look at the actions, then American capability to produce ammunition has grown quicker than European, probably because it has a freer economy and the reaction has been more immediate. Europeans are getting into gear, BAE and also Rheinmetall and others, they are getting into gear. But they are not so far into gear that to guarantee for us that even when this war has been won, we'll have strong enough industry to keep spending, let's say, to the tune of 2% of the GDPs. We're still not spending to the tune of 2% of the GDPs in NATO. 20 countries are, others are not. Over the last 10 years, from 2014, when the pledge was renewed to do 2%, we've not spent close to $1 trillion. And this not spending means our own warehouses are empty of ammunition now already. This situation is not turning dangerous for Ukraine. This situation is turning dangerous for NATO, for the free world. And if I look at the words, it's all very nice. And then I look at the numbers as I presented them here. You can all find them. Estonian Ministry of Defense has put it all together in 15 pages. And you can learn these numbers by heart. And you can keep telling, everybody who says, but we need so much. 0.1% of the GDP. Seriously, so much.
Wolfgang, let me have you focus on the German piece of this especially. Chancellor Scholz gave a much lauded speech, I believe, on February 27, 2022, about the Zeitenwende. How is he doing on delivering on that promise?
Well, a couple of points. First, let's accept the fact that for Germany, it's been practically a 180-degree turnaround in fundamental concepts which have governed our foreign policy for decades. When I started in the German Foreign Ministry in the 1970s, I was told on day one, we have a dogma which says, never ever will we deliver a single weapon to an area of conflict. Today, after Zeitenwende, we are numero uno among European EU member countries in delivering arms and other military goods to Ukraine. That's been a huge change. So in some way, we have done quite a bit considering where we came from a rather pacifist, friendly with Russia kind of history and all of that. I don't have time to go into that. So I think Chancellor Scholz and his government deserve recognition of that effort. And I think President Zelensky himself has repeatedly, thanked the German government for that. Having said that, let me add two critical remarks. I think we're now reaching a point, not where the Germans are beginning to be tired of yet another supporting package. We're not America. But I think that it becomes more and more important for our publics, Germany and beyond, to explain that this is actually not only about doing something, morally good, militarily relevant for Ukraine, but that it is actually something which we're supposed to do for our very own fundamental security. Because if Ukraine goes down, let me be colloquial, goes down the drain, the next ones in line are obvious, and the fear is palpable. Maybe not yet so much in Germany and Western Europe, but of course, where Kersti comes from, and in Poland, etc. So I think we need to adapt our narrative more and more in the direction, this is about your Atlantic security in its totality. That's also the message that I would address to Donald Trump if and when he becomes a relevant actor again. Second, last point, I think we have for these last almost 2 years now, we have had the tendency of starting, at the low end, delivering low-level kind of weaponry. Then we found out that this is not good enough, so we upgraded it. We had this endless debate a year ago about Leopard tanks. Should we not? What about the US? Are they doing the same thing? Finally, we did say yes. I think time has come for us to turn things around. And let me offer an example. Having seen the Russian attacks on your civilian infrastructure, especially in recent weeks, I would recommend to our Western governments to let President Putin know. This doesn't necessarily need to be a public message. One can also, convey confidential messages. I would convey to him the message, look, one more attack on civilian targets, and we will simply upgrade our deliveries. Speaking of Taurus, this German weapon, which we were discussing on and off. In other words, Mr. Putin, it's your choice. It's in your hands whether your military is going to be facing more and more stuff from our side. In other words, I try to turn around and make it easier for us vis-à-vis our rather pacifist electorate to justify the kinds of deliveries that will be militarily necessary going forward. The way I look at this year, I think it's going to be a difficult year. Thanks.
Let me just ask a quick follow-up question to General Skibitskyi and Foreign Minister Kuleba that builds on that. When you look at outside support, is there a certain capability that you need that you're not getting from your partners, or is it a matter of just more of what you've been getting already? What's most essential?
First of all, we need to understand when there is a targeted support and it's concentrated on achieving some tactical and strategic successes of our armed forces. We could feel it when we were preparing and when we were conducting active counteroffensive. And the equipment, ammunition that's provided by our partners today, with very active hostilities, it will be not enough. But nevertheless, we tell the truth to our partners, we communicate, we together are assessing to define what is the threat and what the threat will be from Russian Federation, and our general staff, general headquarters, they think about what our armed forces need to have a success. And it's not just about technical equipment, about ammunition, it's about training, it's about intelligence component and other issues which are needed for successful warfare.
Thank you. Foreign Minister, anything you would add in terms of what you were asking for in those conversations?
Well, we have a very specific list of what we're asking for, and perhaps the priorities for 2024 would be everything related to the air defense systems, air defense missiles, planes, long-range missiles, electronic warfare, because the one who controls the air will define the terms and the time of peace, of ending the war and restoring peace. But in a broader sense, I mean, we have to face a very simple reality, and I understand it's not something that people want to hear, but if Putin attacks European Union tomorrow, the European Union will not be able to defend itself. It's going to fall. Because the current state of the defense industries in the European Union do not allow it to properly defend itself. And I fully agree with Ambassador Ishinger's comment that it's important to put the issue of Ukraine security into the system of coordinates of a broader security. But we have to start with one very simple thing. You know, Europe has to ramp up its defense industries, because the problem Europe is facing is not going to end when Ukraine is going to win. For decades to come, security of Europe has to be guaranteed. And they just can't do it now. And more importantly, I've been in this process for like a year and a half, and in this related to defense industries. Every single country ramping up its own production does not solve the problem.
Sure.
Only a joint EU effort to remove bureaucratic barriers, to align legal frameworks, to synchronize technical standards. Like I'm making this parallel when I have to explain my point that we need an Airbus in defense industries. Hundreds and thousands of companies are involved in the creation of an Airbus plane. Everyone knows what is the end goal. Everyone uses the same legal framework, the same technical standard, and this is why it works. We need the same level of engagement, of cooperation of defense industries. If that problem is not solved, we will still win, but at a much, much, much higher price, and it will take much longer.
John, let me go to you. Wolfgang mentioned the T word, Trump. You served as ambassador to Ukraine under a Republican president in a very different time for the Republican Party. How worried are you about eroding support for Ukraine among congressional Republicans especially, but in the US more broadly? And what do you think might happen if Trump comes back into office?
Thank you for that question, which I will happily answer. But I want to make a point to start. I've watched the debate on Western policy towards Ukraine and Russia, because it's definitely Ukraine and Russia, or perhaps even better, Russia-Ukraine, with extraordinary annoyance for 2 years. The framing of the issue, and we've heard a lot of that framing today, although also we heard some good common sense suggestions, has been largely a combination of obtuseness and cynicism. When we talk about the stalemate, the quote-unquote stalemate in the war over the past year, and the quote-unquote failure of the Ukrainian counteroffensive, there's some truth to that, because there were great expectations in the spring of 2023 for that counteroffensive. But those expectations were fundamentally stupid. The only thing we could have rightly expected a year ago, 10 months ago, if what I call the axis of timidity between Washington and Berlin in supplying to support Ukraine needs for success on the battlefield continued, would be a modest gain of several hundred square kilometers on land, which in fact Ukraine achieved. But because people never understood or didn't want to understand the prospects on the battlefield, we got a lot of talk from uninformed experts, experts in quotation marks, and cynical officials who were very much behind the slow rolling of equipment to Ukraine, and then were surprised they didn't have a big breakthrough. That was nonsense. I can tell you from months and months of serious interaction that we got one excuse after another for not sending anti-ship missiles. Initially Stingers 2 years ago. Of course, ATACMS. And when we send ATACMS, we send the lower-range ATACMS. F-16s, Abrams, Taurus, whatever. We were told the Ukrainians couldn't operate them. We were told we didn't have enough. All baloney. Because, and this was hiding in plain sight, Biden administration policy had the virtue of saying, we cannot let Russia win in Ukraine, and we will quote-unquote stay with Ukraine as long as it takes. But they said in the same breath, no escalation. And they were intimidated from beginning to end by Putin's nuclear threats. And that intimidation was felt elsewhere in Europe, especially in Germany. And what I love, because irony is one of the bitter joys we get involved in politics, the folks who want to make America great again jumped in with both feet and said, we can't help Ukraine because we might have a nuclear war. The guys who are going to be tough on the international stage say that to this day as argument number one for not providing support. Now, so all this talk about the failed offensive, again, combination of obtuseness and cynicism. We arm Ukraine correctly, there will be serious breakthroughs on land. And of course, the talk about the stalemate never talks about what happened at sea, where we saw a stunning Ukrainian success. and basically an opening of the western and central Black Sea to shipping. And Russian fleet cowering in Novorossiysk, rather than being in Feodosia or, of course, Sevastopol. Wolfgang was right that an important part of the problem is a failure to frame the issue properly. The issue is not the war in Ukraine. The issue is a rogue superpower, nuclear superpower, with a economic fleet of clay, that wants to revise the post-Cold War order, and even the post-World War II order in many respects. And that danger is coming for us, specifically the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, if Putin wins in Ukraine. Now, part of the uninformed debate has led to this talk about negotiations. We're getting tired. We're getting tired. And the knuckleheads who oppose strong support for Ukraine talk about the forever war, ignoring the fact that Americans have not sent one soldier to fight, and NATO has not sent one soldier to fight. All we're doing is providing support for a country which will defeat our enemy. And Russia is our enemy under Putin. Actually, let me be polite. They're our adversary. They demonstrated that when they launched cyber attacks against us in the spring of 2021 with a very, very weak response from the Biden administration. They demonstrated that electoral interference in the United States and elsewhere in the West. Not to mention their hand behind what's happening in the Middle East. They are our foe. We need to treat as our foe. We understand that Moscow is coming for our lunch. The aid we give to Ukraine, both military and economic, is what, 3% of our budget, 3.5%, of our defense budget. A great investment in American security. Okay, that's the way to understand this. And if we understand it that way, the problem we have with American support for Ukraine will go away. And the Biden administration, which I've just said some critical things about the Biden team, but their overall policy has been adequate to the great challenge of the Putin danger, but only adequate. And if Biden began every week to lay out what he laid out in his Oval Office speech, what was it, late October, early November, and then in his Washington Post op-ed, and if Blinken, Sullivan, and Austin repeat this every week, this concept will get through. And the quaking in our boots about Moscow's alleged nuclear escalation will be put in its proper place because we have not behaved like a superpower in dealing with this threat. By the way, never in American history, until this recent 2-year episode, did senior American officials say publicly, we can't do X, Y, or Z because a country with nukes with which we are at loggerheads might do something. Never once. This is a very bad look, and it undermines American leadership. Now, one reason, not the only one, that you have populists in the United States pushing hard against aid to Ukraine, A, because they don't understand the danger to us, but B, because there was a failure of American foreign policy elites for 18 or 20 years in the greater Middle East before this. So those elites have been delegitimized for that part of our population. And that's unfortunate, we just have to deal with it. But we've now reached a point, at least on that side of the public debate, which does not include the issue of whether we should have peace negotiations or whether we should be sending more advanced weapons to Ukraine, although these things are related. That issue on the other side has been neutralized politically. And everything at the moment, and everything means a lot, because again, as long as we stand with Ukraine, at least to the event we have, Putin can't win. Withdraw American aid, Putin could win, which will be, of course, an existential nightmare for Ukraine, as Medvedev just reminded us in the last couple of days. And by the way, not once has any advocate of negotiations dealt publicly with Russian war crimes in Ukraine, where you have the commander in Bucha being awarded a medal by Putin, where you've had a former president of Ukraine saying truly genocidal things, and of course Solovyov and Simonyan and the whole Russian media all in on destroying Ukrainians who want to be Ukrainians. So no honest discussion of the downside by those who advocate no escalation and quote-unquote peace. But coming back to this, everything's going to be decided for this coming year in the House of Representatives with a role for the Senate. It all depends on our border with Mexico, which is a disaster and which should be fixed. And over 70% of Americans believe that, including 51% of Democrats. So it's in Biden's interest to fix this before he goes into a general election. His problem is his base loves it. His base loves it. That's the Democratic side of the problem. The Republican side of the problem is you have a very small Republican minority in the House of Representatives. What is it, 3 or 4 votes now? There are, I don't have an exact number, but this number is very good, between 6 to 10 members of the Freedom Caucus, right, the ultra-MAGA guys in the House, who want to kill our aid to Ukraine. Just complete knuckleheads. I think we could blame stupidity. We don't have to look for malice or forethought. They have another 30 or so people in the House who think like them, but who don't really care that much, but they'll always sound like them. Then you've got 50 to 90 who would like to send support to Ukraine, but worry about the politics of that. The point is really very simple. If there is a decent deal on the border done in the Senate, endorsed by the White House, Speaker Johnson, who comes from, by and large, Freedom Caucus territory, not quite there, but by and large, has said that he will put that bill on the floor without amendment. That's really important, without amendment. So the 6 to 10 folks I referred to cannot put something on it which kills it. And you'll get a vote, and it'll happen. I don't want to sound overly optimistic. Before, the former Speaker of the House, McCarthy, was defenestrated. I thought it was 70% it would get done. Now I'm saying 52%. Because A, it's possible the Democrats may not go far enough because they pay too much attention to their progressive base. And it's also possible that there'll be a bad faith effort on the Freedom Caucus side and Johnson wavers. Although I hear very good things about Johnson as a man of his word. And he says he'll put it on the floor if you get a decent deal on the border. Also, this is important but not definitive. Johnson said within 36 hours of becoming the speaker, we have to stop Putin in Ukraine, we have to worry about Poland, and also otherwise. That's a really good thing, because no one from that part of the spectrum talks that way, which means he's not quite on this critical national security issue, part of that spectrum. Bottom line, it'll get done, in my opinion, but probably not for 6 or 8 weeks, because it's not so easy for Biden to do what I think is in his interest, and then Johnson's got to deliver, which cannot, I think it'll happen, but it cannot be taken for granted. Now, to specifically answer your question on Trump,
Yep.
and I realize I've taken a lot of time.
Let me give you 30 seconds because I want to get to one more question.
Okay. We don't know. We just saw what Trump did in Iowa. There's a very good chance he'll be the Republican nominee. And if he's a Republican nominee, there's a good chance he wins the election. That's not a good thing. The question is it going to be a bad thing? When he was president first time, he had a strong national security team. I wish he had this government, this administration had a stronger national security team. And his policy, despite some of the truly dreadful things he said, was solid. He sent the javelins to Ukraine that Obama refused to send. The question is who's going to be his team? And we don't know the answer to that. Rick Grinnell and MAGA types say, we're not going to allow those people who came in the first time. But Robert O'Brien, who was good as Trump's last NSA, has been saying to people privately that he's going to be in the administration. And Trump on the stump, while not exactly encouraging, does not sound like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who wants to just kill that aid to Ukraine. So it's an open question, but I hope we don't have to see that possibility.
Let me do one very quick last question to Wolfgang and Kersti and the foreign minister, and that's on NATO as we look ahead to the summit in July, I believe, in Washington. What is an optimistic but plausible scenario for what is achieved at the Washington summit when it comes to Ukraine's membership in NATO? Wolfgang, we'll start with you.
I don't have an optimistic scenario. I just can't see how it's going to happen in the current circumstances. I wish I could. I would be in favor, but if you give me 30 more seconds. Yep. Getting a country into NATO is, as we have recently relearned, not an easy thing. A much easier case called Sweden, a country not at war in any way with Russia or anyone else, still waiting to get in because one member country has had a problem with it. And maybe that's now going to be solved, but they've been waiting for a long time. And I would just think that even if most of us here, adults in the room, would agree that it's a good idea to bring Ukraine into NATO, I would be afraid that there would be 1 or 2 or 3 members, with more than 30 member countries in NATO, that would say, no, or at least not yet, etc. And that, of course, if that were to happen, we would really, allow President Putin to have a joyful a success dinner. And I don't want that to happen. So it's a difficult thing.
Yeah. Kersti?
Yeah, I'm as pessimistic as Wolfgang is, frankly, because from the beginning of this war, it has bothered me that, I mean, when Jake Sullivan came out and said we need Russia to have a strategic failure in Ukraine, I realized that they create themselves space to declare victory out of nothing. And when I heard last September in Yes conference in Kiev, Victoria Nuland to congratulate Ukrainians of achieving what Jake Sullivan had said they need to achieve, then I realized we are in deep trouble. Strategic failure for Putin, indeed, for not conquering Kiev has been achieved, and the objective and the bar has been really low. In addition, there is this real worry, what also Ambassador Herbst explained to us, that during the Cold War, West didn't blink once. Now we blink from morning to evening and tell it publicly. This is also a bad sign. And I went to America to talk to quite some think tankers, and my understanding is that the democratic ambition is to put this thing on back burner till the elections are over because they've not been successful enough. And if I now look at all this picture and at Washington summit, then indeed, if I were Putin, I will have champagne and caviar in cold. And this is something which I think we need to talk really openly about, because otherwise we will not achieve it. We need to stop blinking. And of course, I appreciate the difficulty. When we were accepted to NATO, it was on the basis that everybody said, okay, let them come in, we never have to fight Russia. This is a totally different situation. It's serious. So I do not underestimate how difficult it is, but we need to get it done, and the chances are pretty low right now.
Foreign Minister, I've heard you say that you can't afford to be pessimistic, so I'll look to you to end on an optimistic note here.
Daniel, I hate the questions that require diplomatic answers, and you asked exactly that one. So the diplomatic answer to your question is, I believe in Washington, Ukraine will make another step towards membership, but the content of that step remains to be seen. But I would like to remind everyone that 2 days, 48 hours before the European Commission granted Ukraine status of a candidate country, the decision was not there. And we were told that it's not going to happen and we have to agree to something else. We have to agree to a half solution. Less than 24 hours before last European Council, we were told that Ukraine would not open accession talks with with the European Union. So with all this skepticism, rational skepticism, well-grounded skepticism around, I think we all have to follow the rule that the people of Ukraine teach the whole world: never give up, and you will get it eventually.
That is a good note to end on. General, Foreign Minister, Ambassadors, President, thank you so much for an incredibly rich conversation. Thank you.